Sagittarius. Welcome to Mary's Angel Tarot. This is a general reading for Sagittarius Sun, Moon, Rising, and Venus. Okay, Sagittarius, let's get started. There's a stillness in you right now that you've been misreading. You've been calling it emptiness. You've been calling it loneliness. You've been waking up with it in the morning and carrying it through your afternoon and sitting with it at night and interpreting it as evidence that something is missing from your life, something essential, something that all the inner work and all the self-love and all the independence you've built still hasn't been able to fill. And you're not wrong that something is missing. But you've been wrong about what the stillness means. It's not a symptom of absence. It's a preparation for arrival. Your entire energy field has been quietly clearing space, rearranging itself, making room for something your conscious mind doesn't know is coming, but your soul has been expecting for longer than you can remember. Someone is about to walk into your life. And when they do, that stillness you've been sitting in, that quiet you've been mistaking for lack, is going to reveal itself as the exact shape of the space they were always meant to fill. I need you to understand something about the way significant people arrive. They don't come with announcements. They don't enter your life through the doors you've been watching. You've been looking in one direction, maybe toward dating apps or social events or the places where logic tells you connections are formed. And you've been scanning those spaces with a mixture of hope and exhaustion, showing up but not really expecting anything, going through motions that feel more like obligation than genuine anticipation. And that quiet resignation, that sense of, I'll keep trying, but I don't really believe anything is going to change, has been slowly eroding something in you that I want to address before we go any further. It's been eroding your belief in surprise, your capacity to be caught off guard by something wonderful. You've become so accustomed to predictability, to knowing how things will play out, to being right about your low expectations, that you've almost lost the ability to imagine a scenario you didn't see coming. And that's exactly the kind of scenario that's approaching. This person is going to arrive from a direction you weren't looking, through a circumstance you didn't plan, in a moment when your guard is down, not because you chose to lower it, but because you simply forgot to hold it up. And that unguarded moment is going to be the most important moment of this entire chapter of your life. Let me tell you what I sense about who this person is, not in terms of their name or their face or the specifics that your mind is hungry for, but in terms of their energy. Because their energy is what's going to hit you first, before you know anything about them. Before a single meaningful word has been exchanged, you're going to feel something. A recognition that doesn't come from memory. A familiarity that doesn't come from having met before. It's going to feel like your nervous system suddenly dropping into a state of calm that you didn't initiate. Like your body deciding on its own, without consulting your brain, that this person is safe. And that feeling is going to confuse you because you've met plenty of people who seemed safe and turned out not to be, and your defense mechanisms are sophisticated enough by now to not trust first impressions. But this isn't a first impression. This is something older than impression. This is your energy recognizing a frequency it's been tuned to receive since before you understood what any of this meant. And the recognition is going to bypass every wall you've built, every filter you've installed, every test you normally run before you let someone close. Not because those protections are failing, but because this person isn't triggering them. They're moving through your defenses not by force, but by resonance, the way a specific note can pass through a wall that blocks every other sound. I want to talk about what you've been through that makes this arrival so significant, because the happiness I'm describing isn't generic. It isn't the kind of happiness that could belong to anyone hearing a message like this. It's specifically calibrated to the exact shape of your pain. And your pain has a very specific shape. You've been hurt by people who were supposed to be important. People who position themselves as permanent fixtures in your life and then prove to be temporary in the cruelest possible way. Not temporary because of circumstances, not temporary because of timing, temporary because they chose to be. Because when things got difficult, when the connection required something beyond surface level comfort, they made a decision, and the decision was to leave. Maybe not all at once. Maybe it was the slow, agonizing kind of leaving where the person is still physically present but emotionally gone, where you can feel them retreating by degrees, where every conversation gets a little shorter and every silence gets a little longer, and you're watching the connection thin out like fabric worn down to threads, but you can't stop it and you can't name it. And by the time it finally breaks, you've been grieving for months without anyone acknowledging that there was something to grieve. That experience, and I suspect it's happened more than once, has left a specific wound in you. Not a wound of the heart exactly, a wound of belief. You stopped believing that someone could show up and stay. You stopped believing that importance was permanent. You started treating every new connection as inherently temporary, enjoying it in the moment, but never fully investing, because some part of you was always braced for the departure. Always watching for the early signs of withdrawal. Always keeping a piece of yourself in reserve so that when the inevitable happened, when this person too revealed themselves to be passing through rather than settling in, you'd have something left. Something they hadn't touched. Something that was still entirely yours. And that reservation, that deliberate withholding, has kept you safe in a way that also kept you profoundly alone. Because you can't fully connect with someone when you're simultaneously preparing for their absence. You can't let someone become truly important to you when you've already decided, before they've even had a chance to prove otherwise, that they're eventually going to leave. And here's what I need you to hear. Even though it's going to bump up against that wound and it's going to sting, the person who's coming is going to challenge that belief at its root. They're not going to challenge it with words, not initially at least, because words are the currency of the people who let you down and you've learned not to spend them at face value. They're going to challenge it with presence, with consistency, with the slow, steady, almost maddeningly undramatic act of showing up, again and again and again. In small ways that you'll barely notice at first, and then in larger ways that you won't be able to ignore. They're going to be there when it's convenient and when it's not. When you're at your best and when you're at your worst. When you're making it easy for them to stay and when you're unconsciously testing them, pushing against the boundaries of the connection to see if it holds, to see if they flinch, to see if this time, finally, someone doesn't leave when the pressure increases. They're not going to leave. I want to sit with that sentence for a moment because I know how it lands in a body that's been trained for abandonment. It lands like a threat almost, like a dare, like something that's asking you to expose the most vulnerable part of yourself, the part that still wants to believe in permanence. And you're terrified that if you expose it one more time and you're wrong one more time, something inside you will close for good. Something that's been holding on by a thread will finally snap and you'll become the person you've been fighting so hard not to become. The person who doesn't care. The person who doesn't try. The person who has sealed themselves off so completely that nothing gets in, not pain, but not joy either. And the rest of your life becomes this flat, survivable, emotionally room temperature existence where nothing hurts because nothing matters. You're not going to become that person. And the reason you're not is standing just outside the frame of your current awareness, waiting for the exact right moment to step into view. I want to describe something to you that's going to happen when you first interact with this person in a meaningful way. There's going to be a moment in the conversation, and it might be the first conversation or the second or the third, but it's going to happen early, where they say something that stops you, not something profound or rehearsed or designed to impress. Something simple, something that reveals a way of seeing the world that mirrors your own so precisely that it feels like hearing your own thoughts spoken in someone else's voice. And in that moment, something in your chest is going to unlock. A door you didn't even know you'd been standing in front of is going to click open. And behind that door is a room full of feelings you thought you'd outgrown. Excitement, curiosity, that specific flutter of anticipation that you haven't felt since before the disappointments taught you to flatten it. And your first instinct is going to be to close the door, to step back, to tell yourself it doesn't mean anything, that you're reading too much into it, that you felt this before and it led nowhere good. But I want you to fight that instinct, not aggressively, not recklessly, but gently. I want you to leave the door open just a crack, just enough to let the light through. Because what's on the other side of that door is the beginning of the happiness I'm telling you about. And it needs the smallest opening to start. There's a quality this person carries that I think is going to disorient you because it's something you've wanted but never actually encountered in someone else. They are emotionally literate, not in the performative way where someone has learned the vocabulary of feelings and uses it strategically in the real way. The way where someone can sit with discomfort without trying to fix it, where someone can hold space for your anger without getting defensive, where someone can hear you say something vulnerable and respond not with advice or deflection or their own competing vulnerability, but with simple, grounded, you don't have to carry that alone acknowledgement. And for someone like you, someone who has spent their entire life being the emotionally literate one in every room, every relationship, every dynamic, encountering that quality in another person is going to feel almost disorienting. Like discovering that the thing you've been pouring out for everyone else actually exists somewhere for you too. Like finding water in a desert and not trusting it because deserts aren't supposed to have water, but there it is, clear and real and waiting for you to drink. And they're going to see you. I mean, really see you. Not the version you present, not the curated, careful, emotionally managed version that you've been offering the world, because the full version felt like too much for anyone to handle. This person is going to see past that management. They're going to notice the things you try to hide, the sadness you tuck behind your smile, the exhaustion you mask with productivity, the loneliness you dress up as independence. And instead of being scared off by what they see, instead of backing away or pretending they didn't notice, they're going to move closer, quietly, without fanfare, without making it a big dramatic revelation. They're just going to adjust their position in relation to you almost imperceptibly, so that they're standing a little nearer to the truth of who you are. And you're going to feel it. That subtle shift, that almost gravitational pull of someone choosing to close the distance between themselves and your reality instead of maintaining the comfortable gap that everyone else has been content to stand behind. Let me address something that I feel is important about the timing of this person's arrival, because it's not accidental. They're not showing up despite where you are in your life. They're showing up because of where you are. And where you are, even though it might not feel like it, is exactly the right place. You've been doing work on yourself that doesn't have a completion date or a certificate of achievement. You've been slowly, painfully, sometimes grudgingly dismantling patterns that were handed to you by people who didn't know any better. The pattern of choosing people who need to be fixed because being needed felt safer than being wanted. The pattern of losing yourself in someone else's world because your own felt too quiet to bear. The pattern of mistaking intensity for intimacy and confusing chaos for connection. You've been untangling these things thread by thread, sometimes pulling too hard and making a mess of it. Sometimes getting so frustrated with the process that you wanted to throw the whole tangled mass in the trash and walk away, but you didn't walk away. You kept working, you kept learning, you kept choosing day after imperfect day to show up for your own healing, even when the results were invisible and the progress felt glacial and nobody was giving you credit for how hard you were trying. That work is what's calling this person in, not your appearance, not your accomplishments, not any of the external things that you've been grooming and polishing in the hopes of being attractive enough to earn love. Your inner work, the version of you that exists after the untangling, the version that's clearer, more honest, more grounded, more capable of receiving love without immediately converting it into something that can be used against you. That version, the one that felt like it was taking forever to develop, the one that sometimes still feels fragile and unfinished, is radiating a signal, and the person who's approaching is the one who can hear it. I want to talk about what happiness is actually going to look like in this context, because I think you've been imagining it wrong. You've been imagining it as a lightning bolt, as a sudden, overwhelming, everything changes in an instant experience. And while there will be moments of that sharp, bright, take your breath away moments, the deeper happiness is going to be quieter. It's going to look like Tuesday evenings. It's going to look like a text that says nothing important but makes you smile anyway. It's going to look like comfortable silence in a car, like someone remembering something you mentioned once, weeks ago, something small, and bringing it up in a way that tells you they were actually listening. It's going to look like the absence of performance. The relief of being with someone who doesn't require you to be entertaining or impressive or endlessly positive. Someone who can sit with you in a gray mood without trying to fix it, without making you feel guilty for having it, without treating your humanness as a problem to be solved. That's what this happiness looks like. Not fireworks. Foundation. The kind of joy that doesn't burn bright and fast and leave you in the dark. The kind that heats the room slowly and stays warm through the night. There's something I need to say about the fear you're going to feel when you start to realize this is real. Because the fear is going to be significant. It might even be bigger than the joy at first. And that's not because something is wrong with you. It's because your nervous system has very good records. It remembers every time you let hope in and got burned. It remembers every time you believed someone's consistency only to watch it evaporate. It remembers the specific sensation of falling for someone and then, mid-fall, realizing there was nothing and no one there to catch you. And when this new person begins to show the signs of being different, your nervous system isn't going to celebrate. It's going to sound the alarm. It's going to flood you with anxiety and doubt and the overwhelming urge to sabotage this before it has the chance to hurt you. You might pick fights. You might withdraw. You might suddenly become critical of things that don't actually bother you, manufacturing reasons to distance yourself because distance is familiar and closeness is terrifying. And if any of that happens, I need you to recognize it for what it is. Not evidence that this connection is wrong, evidence that this connection is so right that it's triggering every unhealed wound you carry. The wounds don't activate for things that don't matter. They activate for things that matter so much that your deepest self perceives them as high stakes. And this is high stakes. This person, this connection, this happiness, it's the real thing. And the real thing is always the scariest thing. I also want to speak to something that I sense you've been carrying as a kind of secret shame. You've been lonely, truly, deeply, bone level lonely. And you've hidden it so well that most people in your life would be shocked to hear you describe it that way. Because you've built a life that looks full. You have people. You have activities. You have a routine that keeps you occupied and a social presence that suggests you're thriving. But underneath all of that architecture, there's been this hollow space. A space that exists not because you don't have people around you, but because the people around you, as much as you love them, aren't reaching the part of you that's lonely. Because that part of you isn't lonely for just anyone. It's lonely for a very specific kind of connection, the kind where you don't have to translate yourself, where you don't have to explain your references or simplify your thoughts or pretend to be less complex than you are in order to make the interaction run smoothly. You've been lonely for someone who can keep up with you, someone whose mind moves at the same speed as yours, whose emotional depth matches your own, whose silence is as rich and communicative as their words. That kind of connection is rare. It's rare. And the knowledge of its rarity has been part of what's made the loneliness so heavy, because it comes with the fear that what you need might not exist. That you might be too specific, too particular, too much of something, and not enough of something else to ever find the person who fits. They exist, and they're almost here. I want to describe something to you that might seem like a small detail, but is actually one of the most important things I can tell you about this person. They're going to make you laugh. Not the polite social laugh that you offer to keep conversations comfortable. Not the performative laugh that you use to signal engagement when you're actually somewhere else entirely. They're going to make you laugh from your stomach. From the uncontrolled, unfiltered, slightly embarrassing place where real laughter lives. The kind of laugh that takes you by surprise and rearranges your face and makes you sound like a version of yourself you'd forgotten existed. And that laughter is going to be one of the first signs that something is genuinely different about this connection. Because you've been so serious for so long. Not humorless, you're actually quite funny when you let yourself be, but serious in the way that people become when they've been carrying too much for too long without help. The weight of your responsibilities and your disappointments and your self-imposed standards of perfection has compressed your joy into something manageable, something that fits neatly into the margins of your carefully structured life. And this person is going to decompress it. They're going to give your joy room to be messy and loud and unstructured and ridiculous. And the relief of that decompression is going to feel like a homecoming. Now, I want to go somewhere that might feel vulnerable, but I think it's important. You've been asking for this, not publicly, not in words you've shared with anyone, but in the quiet cathedral of your own mind, in the moments between sleep and waking, in the prayers you've whispered that you half believed were going to the ceiling, and nowhere beyond it, you've been asking. For someone, for the right someone, for the person who would make the loneliness make sense by being the answer it was always pointing toward. And sometimes those prayers felt powerful, and sometimes they felt pathetic, and sometimes they felt like talking to a wall, and sometimes on the rare translucent nights when everything was very still and your heart was very open, they felt like talking to something that was actually listening. I want to tell you that something was listening every single time. Even the times when it felt like nothing. even the times when you gave up mid-sentence because the silence felt too heavy to speak into. Something received every word. And what's coming? This person, this happiness, this reconfiguration of your daily existence from endurance into actual enjoyment. It is the response. Delayed, yes. Arriving in its own time rather than yours, yes. But arriving undeniably, unmistakably arriving. And when it does, you're going to feel the echo of every unanswered prayer resolving into a single, clear, overwhelming yes. There's a detail about how this is going to unfold that I want to prepare you for. This person isn't going to declare themselves immediately. They're not going to arrive in your life already knowing the role they're meant to play. The connection is going to begin in what feels like an ordinary way, a conversation, a shared context, an intersection of paths that could easily be written off as coincidence if you're not paying attention. And that's why I'm telling you now, before it happens, to pay attention. Pay attention to the people who enter your space in the coming period of your life. Pay attention not to the ones who make the biggest entrance, but to the one who makes you feel the most at ease. The one whose presence doesn't activate your performance mode. The one you find yourself being strangely, almost uncomfortably honest with. Saying things you don't normally say, sharing thoughts you don't normally share, as though some invisible barrier between your private self and your public self has temporarily dissolved and you can't figure out why. That dissolution is the sign. That unexpected honesty is the marker. And the person standing in front of you when it happens is the one I'm talking about. Here at Mary's Angel Tarot, what I've come to understand about significant arrivals is that they rarely look significant in the moment. The moment is usually quiet, unremarkable. The kind of moment you wouldn't remember unless something later caused you to trace back through your days looking for the exact point where everything began to shift. And when you find it, when you locate the moment this person entered your awareness, you're going to be amazed at how simple it was, how easily you could have missed it, how close you came to looking the other way or being somewhere else or letting the moment pass without engagement. And the understanding that your entire happiness hinged on a moment that fragile, that ordinary, that easy to overlook is going to change the way you move through the world from that point forward. It's going to make you gentler with the present, more attentive to what's right in front of you, less fixated on the dramatic future you've been trying to manifest, and more curious about the seemingly uneventful now where the real magic is quietly unfolding. I want to tell you about the kind of happiness that's specifically coming for you through this person, because it's not the kind the world usually sells. The world sells happiness as a destination, a state you arrive at and then maintain, a place where problems dissolve and feelings are permanently positive and everything aligns into a neat, photogenic configuration that you can display as evidence of a life well lived. But that's not what this is. The happiness that's approaching you is alive. It breathes. It has texture and variation, and days where it looks like quiet contentment, and days where it looks like giddy disbelief, and days where it looks like the profound relief of being held by someone who doesn't need you to perform your own well-being for their comfort. This happiness includes difficulty. It includes the uncomfortable growth that comes from being truly seen by another person, from having your patterns reflected back to you by someone who loves you enough to be honest. It includes the vulnerability of needing someone, which for someone like you, someone who has carefully constructed an identity around not needing anyone, is going to feel like jumping off a cliff. But the difference between this cliff and every other cliff you've been pushed off of is that this time the ground rises to meet you. This time the fall ends not in impact but in arms. I want to address something about the way you've been protecting yourself, because I think it's reaching a turning point. You've built a version of your life that works without a partner. And that's not just coping. That's a genuine achievement. You've created stability, routine, purpose, even moments of real happiness entirely on your own. And I want to honor that, because too many messages like this treat being alone as a problem to be solved rather than a state that can be rich and full and meaningful in its own right. You are not broken because you're alone. Your life is not incomplete because there isn't someone standing in it. The life you've built is real and it's valid, and it should not be dismantled to make room for someone else. What's going to happen when this person arrives isn't a dismantling, it's an expansion. They're not going to fill a gap in your life. They're going to add a dimension to it that you haven't experienced before. Think of it less like completing a puzzle and more like adding color to a drawing that was already beautiful in black and white. The drawing doesn't become real when the color arrives. It was always real. The color just reveals aspects that were already there but couldn't be seen without it. Something I also want to prepare you for is the reaction of the people around you. When this person enters your life and the happiness becomes visible, the people who know you are going to respond in different ways. Some of them are going to be overjoyed. They've watched you be alone, watched you deflect questions about your love life with practiced ease, watched you put on the brave face of someone who's chosen independence when what they really sensed underneath was a loneliness you refused to admit. And for those people, seeing you happy, genuinely, visibly, can't hide it happy, is going to feel like watching the sun come out after a storm that went on too long. But others are going to struggle with it, not because they don't love you, but because your independence was something they relied on. Your availability was something they counted on. Your identity as the strong one, the self-sufficient one, the one who didn't need anyone, was a role that served other people's narratives about you as much as it served your own. And when that role shifts, when you start giving time and energy and emotional investment to a new person, the reconfiguration is going to rattle some of the relationships you thought were solid. Pay attention to who celebrates your happiness without condition. Those are your people. The rest will either adjust or reveal something about themselves that you needed to see. I'm bringing this toward its close, but I want to leave you with something that I think is going to sit with you long after this message ends. The person who's coming isn't coming to save you. I know that's not what you consciously expect. You've done too much inner work to still be operating from the rescue fantasy. But there's a deeper layer beneath the conscious, beneath the work, where a small, tired, honest part of you is hoping that someone will arrive and take some of the weight. Not all of it. Just enough that your shoulders stop aching. Just enough that the effort of being alive stops feeling like a solo expedition up a mountain with no summit in sight. And I want to validate that hope, because it's not weakness, it's not codependency, it's not a failure of your self-sufficiency. It's the most natural, most human, most ancient desire a person can have, the desire to be accompanied. To share the road with someone who doesn't need you to carry them, but who walks close enough that your arms occasionally brush, and the contact reminds you that you're not doing this alone. That's what this person brings. Not rescue, companionship, the kind that makes the load lighter, not because they're carrying your half, but because their presence reminds you that carrying things is easier when someone else knows what you're holding. When someone else can look at you at the end of a hard day and say, I see how heavy that was, and mean it because they were paying attention, because they care enough to pay attention, because paying attention to you isn't an obligation for them. It's an instinct. Mark my words, You are going to be so happy. Not the fragile, fingers crossed, please let this last kind of happy. The grounded, embodied, I can feel this in my bones kind of happy. The kind that doesn't need to be performed or protected or proven. The kind that just is, like gravity, like breath, like something that was always meant to be part of your life and simply hadn't found its way to you yet. It's found its way now, and the someone who carries it is closer than the next beat of your heart. Stay open, stay soft, stay brave enough to let something beautiful begin, even when everything you've been through has taught you to expect the opposite. This time is different. This person is different, and the happiness that's about to fill your life is going to be so real, so warm, so steady, and so yours that one day, not far from now, you're going to look back at this exact moment and realize it was the last time you ever doubted that something this good could happen to you. All right, thank you so much for watching Mary's Angel Tarot. Take care of your energy, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye.